So when we grow mushrooms in permaculture, the way that we grow mushrooms is integrated every way possible with what we have running on the farm anyway. So primarily focus on oyster mushrooms, so blue oysters, grey oysters and pink oysters, and also shiitake mushrooms. And for this episode I'm just going to focus on oysters. With the oyster mushroom growing, you need similar relationship between nitrogen and carbon as you do with compost. So it took us quite a while to identify different plants that work really well for growing oysters. You can't grow them on logs. It has to be a chipped substrate, which needs to be pasteurized or in some way cleaned of competition from the oyster mycelium. So what we found on our farm, with the criteria that it has to be ideally from our farm, not something that we're buying specially in, we found that Gorse covers all those needs. It's got a really great ratio of nitrogen and carbon. It's also got the benefit of being a bit of a problem on our paddocks. It sort of grows a lot and it's not very pleasant to have around sometimes, so it's something that we try and keep on top of. It's readily abundant everywhere and it has a nice regrowth ability, or a lot of people think it's a negative. And so it took us a lot of trial and error. There's a few things that work as well, like bamboo for example. But for us, we just found that the gorse is this amazing resource. It's completely changed the way that we look at it. Suddenly we see paddocks that have a bit of gorse growing, go, oh great, you know, time to do another harvest. So how we've made it a little bit more palatable for harvesting is a few little gears. So these are welding gloves, easily available from most stores that stock Chinese products. So these are Chinese welding gloves. Same for these jackets. We got these from Arthur's Emporium. And of course the ever-present steel electric chainsaw. In the video of in the part where you saw me harvesting the gorse, you would have seen how often I use the chainsaw, put it down, pull a few out, pick it up again, do a little bit more cutting. And you're also very close contact because you're often trying to get underneath the shrubbery. So being in close contact with a petrol chainsaw that's emitting fumes the whole time or idling while you're not using it, it's just not very fun. So that's why we found that actually a must-have is an electric chainsaw. And if you can minimize your contact with the gorse, it helps a lot as well. So a little bit of a pitchfork, but these gloves really are quite amazing what they stop. And so we find that we need to do about a very heaped trailer load of gorse to make it worth the effort of lighting the bathtub to pasteurize. So even though all oils are carbon-based, we try and avoid using the commercial chainsaw lubricants because they're fossil fuel based. So we found that actually canola oil works really well. And so with our electric chainsaw, that means that we're not using any fossil fuels whatsoever. So that's quite a nice little tip for anybody who wants to use electric chainsaws in the food forest system, or how we're doing here with the gorse. Just use canola oil. It's worked fine for us. So yeah, another little idea there. So growing our oyster mushrooms on gorse is a really good way of harvesting from our zone 4s and 5s. It's really bringing in the entirety of the farm and not just having grazing animals in your zone 4s or native animals in your zone 5s, whatever. We're actually feeding a lot of the stuff that grows wild and uncontrolled into our food production areas. And what's really great about mushroom growing specifically in permaculture is it's a great way of doing what's called function stacking. So if you draw a straight line from, for example, eradication of a pest, in this case gorse, you might have a few options of what you might do with it. You might burn it, which creates no harnessed yield, or otherwise you might chip it and put it in the compost, which is maybe what we would do otherwise. So what we do with mushrooms is we create a function stacking effect where we say, okay, so we've got this gorse, it's something that we want to eradicate, so we cut it. And then the direct route is going to go to the compost, but in the process between that, we'll chip it up, we'll pasteurize it, we'll grow mushrooms off it, which we can sell for profit. And then that spent mulch we then can put into the goat bedding, which then gets loaded up full of nitrogen from the goat's urine, and then it still ends up in the compost and then back in the garden beds or in the food forest. So what we're doing there is we're basically just stacking up a whole lot of functions and covering a few principles in permaculture. So we're sort of making sure that we have most of our needs covered from the farm, and all of our waste is strategically and smartly designed to have some benefit somewhere else on the farm. So we're trying to keep everything in a nice loop and maximizing the value of every product that we use and touch. And of course, to finish the picture off, we drive around everywhere with the electric car. So off to the nursery now. See you down there.